Imagine this. Before diving into today's story, the viewer is gently invited to join a community, not just to watch another video. The narrator asks them to hit the like button and subscribe if they have ever dreamed of changing their life completely, even if everything around them seemed too small for their ambitions. Then comes the hook. Has the viewer ever followed a dream so intensely that a tiny detail in the plan changed everything, turning frustration into the start of something much bigger than expected? That question opens the door for the journey of Dawn, a young woman who thinks she knows exactly where her life should go, only to discover that the wrong destination might be exactly the place where her story truly begins. The narration introduces Dawn as a 25-year-old aspiring artist from a small town in Texas, living with her two sisters and her grandmother Birdie, who became their guardian after the family's life changed years earlier. Dawn's dream is crystal clear. Studying art in Paris, France, a place she imagines as the center of everything creative, sophisticated, and meaningful, in contrast with the dusty pastures and familiar routines around her. She has actually been accepted into an art school there, but the harsh reality is that her savings are not enough, especially after she used part of the money to help with Birdie's medical expenses, a detail that immediately reveals how she constantly puts her own future on hold for the people she loves. This starting point already defines the emotional stakes of the film. Dawn is not just chasing a romantic fantasy about Europe, she is also fighting the quiet fear that life might trap her where she started if she does not take a bold risk soon. Her sister Emily, more impulsive and excited by anything that smells like spectacle, discovers a reality show called The Honey Pot, a dating program that promises a large cash prize, and according to the announcements, takes place in glamorous Paris, France. For Emily, this is the perfect shortcut. Dawn could participate, earn the money, and finally pay for her studies abroad, turning trash TV into the financial bridge to a serious future in the arts. At first, Dawn hesitates because everything about the show goes against how she sees herself. She is reserved, focused, and deeply uncomfortable with the idea of transforming her romantic life into entertainment. But the pressure of the tuition bills and her sister's enthusiasm push her to at least try the audition. What starts as a reluctant experiment becomes a strange opportunity when she surprisingly gets selected, signaling that the producers see something captivating in her mix of vulnerability, honesty, and quiet determination. The night she and Emily go out to celebrate, Dawn's story takes a subtle but crucial turn during a game of pool at a local bar, when she encounters an impeccably dressed cowboy who effortlessly stands out from the usual crowd. There is an instant connection between them, not in the exaggerated way of typical movie passion, but in the form of curious glances and easy conversation that make Dawn briefly forget her worries about money and the upcoming show. This meeting works as an early narrative seed. The film plants this seemingly casual encounter to later reveal how small, random moments can end up rewriting the path of an entire life. At this stage, the audience senses that the cowboy will matter, but the story cleverly withholds his full significance, inviting viewers to pay attention to the details instead of just waiting for big dramatic turns. When the contestants finally depart, they all believe they are heading to the romantic heart of Europe, and the film plays with that expectation using visual and tonal contrast. The promise of sparkling lights, stone bridges, and river reflections in Paris, France is in everyone's mind. The reveal that they have actually arrived in Paris, Texas hits particularly hard for Dawn, who realizes with disbelief that she has traveled in a circle, ending up not far from her own hometown rather than across the ocean. This twist is more than just a joke about mistaken geography. It becomes a metaphor for one of the central ideas of the film, that sometimes life seems to mock a person's dreams by delivering something that looks like a cheap imitation of what was promised. Dawn's disappointment is deep, but she also knows that quitting the show now would mean losing the chance at the money she desperately needs, so she decides to stay, turning frustration into a test of resilience. It is in this wrong Paris that Dawn discovers the cowboy from the bar is actually Trey McCallan, the central figure of the reality show, the bachelor everyone will be competing for on screen. This revelation rearranges everything emotionally and narratively. What seemed like a spontaneous connection at the bar is now entangled with contracts, cameras, and an audience eager for drama. For the viewer, This is where the movie shifts from simple romantic comedy territory into a more layered exploration of authenticity. Because Dawn must now navigate how much of what she feels is real and how much is being shaped or amplified by the artificial environment of the show. Trey himself is not presented as a typical shallow reality star. Glimpses of his doubts and the weight of his role suggest that he too is wrestling with the difference between performance and genuine emotion. As the episodes within the show unfold, Dawn's initial strategy is not to win Trey's affection, but to get eliminated as quickly as possible, since she does not want to be stuck in this artificial version of romance when her true goal is still Paris, France. The irony is that her refusal to play the exaggerated role the producers expect, she remains honest, grounded, and often unintentionally funny, makes her even more interesting both to Trey and to the cameras. The film uses this tension to comment on how reality television feeds on contrast. The quieter, more authentic contestant ends up standing out among louder personalities precisely because she does not try to fabricate a persona. Each group date, interview, and private moment becomes a small test of Dawn's values, forcing her to constantly balance self-protection with the growing realization that she might care more about Trey than she is willing to admit. Around her, other contestants like Lexi and Jasmine assume more strategic roles inside the show, openly or subtly manipulating situations to gain more screen time or more emotional proximity to Trey. Lexi in particular emerges as a kind of narrative mirror for Dawn. Where Dawn values sincerity and long-term goals, Lexi focuses on control, image, and the short-term benefits of staying in the spotlight. The film does not demonize her completely, but it clearly uses her actions to illustrate how easily a competitive environment can push people to compromise their own moral boundaries for attention and advantage. This clash of attitudes strengthens the central question for the viewer. In a world where everything can be edited and monetized, what does it really mean to be honest, especially when honesty might cost a life-changing opportunity? The production team of The Honey Pot also plays a key narrative role, especially figures like Rachel, who walks the fine line between supporting Dawn and serving the show's interests. Through conversations and behind-the-scenes decisions, the film shows how producers constantly weigh authenticity against spectacle, calculating how each tear, confession, or awkward silence might translate into ratings. Dawn slowly realizes that she is not only a contestant, but also a character being constructed by editing choices, story framing, and selective exposure, which intensifies her internal conflict about how much of herself she is willing to give away for the sake of a financial solution. This dimension turns the film into a quiet critique of the entertainment industry, wrapped inside the accessible language of romantic comedy. The emotional climax of the show within the film arrives when Lexi orchestrates a situation that manipulates information and perception, leading Trey to believe that Dawn has not been honest with him or with the process. The result is Dawn's elimination, a moment that hits her like a double blow. She loses not only the chance to secure her future through the prize money, but also the fragile, emerging connection with Trey that she did not want to acknowledge at first. From a script perspective, this is the point where the story strips Dawn of every external advantage, forcing her to confront what truly matters. Is she chasing money, a relationship, or a sense of self-respect that she refuses to sacrifice even when everything crumbles? The viewer is invited to feel the weight of this turning point, where even the wrong Paris seems to reject her, as if the universe were insisting that her dreams are always one step out of reach. Even after leaving the show, Dawn cannot completely detach from what happened, and this is where the film deepens its emotional core instead of simply jumping to an easy reconciliation. When she discovers the truth about Lexi's manipulation and how the narrative around her was distorted, Dawn makes a radical choice. She decides to renounce all the money she has earned from participating in the program in order to find a way to speak honestly with Trey again. This gesture is symbolically powerful, because the entire plot began with her desperation for financial resources. Yet she now willingly lets go of that hard-earned stability to defend something more intangible, her integrity and the possibility of a genuine connection. In doing so, the script suggests that the real turning point in a person's life may not be when they achieve a dream, but when they are willing to lose something important to protect who they really are. Trey's initial reaction when Dawn manages to reach him again is skepticism. which makes sense in light of how long he has existed inside a fabricated environment where almost everything is a performance. For a moment it seems that her sacrifice will not be enough, reinforcing the painful idea that truth does not always win immediately against misinterpretation and manipulation. However, Trey eventually discovers evidence that confirms Dawn's story and learns that she truly gave up all the financial reward just for the chance to explain herself face to face. This revelation works both as romantic validation and as a narrative payoff, closing the thematic arc that began with Dawn compromising her savings for her grandmother and continuing through her willingness to risk everything again for authenticity. The story then shifts its scenery in an almost poetic way. Dawn finally arrives in the real Paris, not as part of a show, but as a student at the art school she had always imagined, turning the distant postcard fantasy into a living, imperfect reality. The city is no longer simply a backdrop for glamour. It becomes a space where she must balance everyday responsibilities, creative challenges, and the lingering feelings she carries from her time on the reality program. The film suggests that even when a dream is realized, it does not magically resolve every internal conflict. Instead, it provides a new stage for those conflicts to evolve, now shaped by the experience of everything she went through in the wrong Paris. This prevents the ending from feeling like a simple wish fulfillment fantasy, grounding it in the emotional lessons the character has learned. When Trey appears again in this true Paris, the gesture feels earned rather than merely convenient, because the story has already proven that both of them are willing to step outside their comfort zones to pursue something real. He does not arrive as a flawless hero, but as someone who has also had to confront his own role in a system that treats emotions as content and people as temporary characters. Their reunion is framed not as the resolution of all problems, but as the beginning of a partnership in which both understand the high cost of honesty in a world that constantly rewards appearances. By placing this moment in the iconic setting that Dawn always dreamed of, the film visually merges her external goal, a life in Paris, with her internal journey toward connection and self-respect. The final movement of the story returns to the logic of the reality show, but twists it in a way that gives Dawn agency. Trey suggests that she publicly rejects him on camera so she can secure the large prize known as the honey pot, essentially transforming the rules of the program into a tool for their shared future rather than a cage. Dawn accepts, and the combination of her choice to still claim the money while openly affirming her feelings for him creates a delicate balance between practicality and romance. The closing images, shown as photos during the credits, depict their relationship continuing while she studies in France, underscoring that the money, the show, and even the geographic confusion between the two Parises were all stepping stones toward a life built on more than just spectacle. In script terms, this is the moment when the wrong Paris is fully reinterpreted as the necessary detour that made the right Paris emotionally possible. Looking at the film as a whole, the narrative uses a deceptively light romantic comedy structure to explore deeper questions about identity, ambition, and how media reshapes intimate experiences into consumable arcs for audiences. Dawn's journey is not just about choosing between places or partners. It is about learning to defend her own story inside systems that constantly try to write it for her, whether through financial pressure, family expectations, or reality show scripts. The wrong city becomes a metaphor for every moment in life when someone feels they have arrived in the opposite place from where they wanted to be, only to later realize that this detour forced them to grow in ways the original plan never would have demanded. In that sense, the movie quietly invites the viewer to look at their own disappointments and ask whether some of them might, in time, reveal themselves as disguised turning points. So, after walking through Dawn's entire path, from the small town in Texas to the neon lights and dusty roads of Paris, Texas, and finally to the stone streets and art studios of Paris, France, the narrator asks the audience to stay engaged, to comment, and to think about one personal question. If the viewer had the chance to chase a major dream but discovered halfway that the path was completely different from what was expected, would they still keep going? Even if it meant risking money, comfort, and reputation the way Dawn does. The video closes by inviting everyone to share in the comments which wrong Paris in their own life ended up leading to something unexpectedly right, and of course to subscribe and like if they want more stories that mix romance, humor, and a deeper, Look at the invisible choices that shape a person's future.